Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from, and welcome to the Evidence for Action webinar on supporting applicants through design consultation and matching services. Evidence for Action, or E4A, is a national program of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation based at the Center for Health and Community at the University of California, San Francisco. My name is Erin Hagan, and I'm the Deputy Director of Evidence for Action. Earlier this month, we released an updated call for proposals, and if you haven't familiarized yourself with that yet or with the broader goals and objectives of the Evidence for Action program, I encourage you to review the call, which can be found on our website, along with a variety of other resources, including a previously recorded webinar about the funding program and objectives. Today, we really are going to focus on our technical assistance services. We've created a variety of services to support applicants, and during the webinar today we will describe the purpose of technical assistance, who it's intended for, the services that are available, and how you can access those services. We'll also set aside time at the end for question and answers. Throughout the webinar, if you have questions, please submit them using the chat feature at the bottom left-hand side of the screen. You can also let us know if you're experiencing any technical difficulties, and someone from ReadyTalk or our team will respond to you. I also want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded and will be available for review on our website later this week. So joining me today are the Evidence for Action Research and Policy Program Manager, Mei-Lin Tan, as well as our partners in providing technical assistance, Albert Wu and Ezine Eze Ajoku from Johns Hopkins University. Albert and Ezine are representing the Accelerating Collaborations for Evaluation, or ACE team, which is the team that runs the matching service. Mei-Lin, let me turn it to you to kick off our discussion about technical assistance.
Thank you, Erin. I would also like to welcome everyone to the webinar. So this webinar is intended for anybody interested in evaluating or testing the impact of interventions on population health or health-related outcomes. This includes program managers and program evaluators, community organization or nonprofit leaders, social service providers, healthcare practitioners, and of course researchers at varying stages of their careers. And this also includes those of you who are working outside the field of health or public health, such as those of you in housing, education, law or public policy, financial services, etc., since we know that programs and policies in these other sectors can often have very important impacts on health. So let me take a moment to describe the mission of E4A. Our mission is to support rigorously designed research that yields convincing findings about the population health, well-being, and equity impacts of interventions. And by interventions, we mean policies, programs, and practices. So in other words, we're looking to fund research that can demonstrate whether an intervention has a positive, negative, or no impact on population health and health equity. While this might seem straightforward, being able to demonstrate the causal impact of an intervention often requires a sophisticated research design that some applicants may not be familiar with. For example, it could involve randomization or some other study design that requires the use of a control or comparison group. And it also often requires recruiting the right number of study participants, measuring or capturing health outcomes in specific ways, and some level or form of statistical analysis. And not all practitioners or people or groups implementing promising interventions have the time or resources to devote to this type of research. So technical assistance is designed to help improve the rigor and feasibility of select proposals to better align them with E4A's criteria for funding. While our main focus at E4A is to build evidence about the effects of important or innovative interventions, we also want it to be inclusive of applicants who may be working on the front lines of an intervention and want to evaluate it rigorously, but who need assistance with the design or implementation of the research itself. So who is technical assistance for? We have found that applicants who could benefit from technical assistance fall into two broad categories. First, there are applicants from academic or research-oriented settings who have methodological expertise on their team, but their proposed project design is not sufficiently rigorous to meet E4A standards. Sometimes this happens if the research design that's required to evaluate the effects of an intervention in a real-world setting is extremely complex, or if researchers coming from other fields or disciplines outside of public health have less experience working with health-related data. Then there are applicants from more practice-oriented settings, such as community organizations or nonprofits, social service agencies, or healthcare providers, people who are deeply familiar with an intervention but may lack the research background or experience to design and implement an elaborate research project. With all these in mind, we have established two forms of technical assistance: design consultation and the matching service. Design consultation is primarily intended for applicants who have the research skills and experience on their team to carry out a rigorous project, while the matching service is for applicants who do not have a researcher on their team and wish to be matched with one. Applicants who are referred to technical assistance can pick which form better suits their needs. I'll now provide an overview of each service. Again, design consultation is mainly intended for applicants who have research expertise on their team. Design consultation consists of a series of phone, video, or in-person consultations with members of E4A leadership and staff to discuss how your research project might be modified or redesigned to answer the same core questions, but with a design that can better draw causal inference. This might involve establishing a clearer theory of change or conceptual framework, refining the data collection procedure or instruments, identifying a suitable comparison group, improving the outcome measures, or discussing ways to ensure that sample sizes are adequate. Sometimes we discuss possible ways to alter the timing of service delivery or program rollout to better isolate the effects that can be attributed to the intervention. Of course, the exact nature of the consultation varies depending on the project. These consultations take place over the course of several weeks or months, which gives applicants time in between consultations to discuss potential changes with their collaborators and partners. There is no specific timeline that a design consultation needs to follow. It depends mostly on the project's own needs and circumstances. And at the end of the consultation process, applicants can submit a new letter of intent to E4A for consideration. And I'll go over that process a little bit later in the presentation. For applicants who don't have relevant experience with research or evaluation, we offer a matching service that's provided by our partners, Accelerating Collaborations for Evaluation, or ACE, which, as Erin mentioned, is based at the Johns Hopkins University. The purpose of the matching service is to connect applicants with qualified researchers based on mutual interests and areas of specialty. These partners then collaborate to form a new, more rigorous and feasible proposal that they can then submit to E4A. So here to talk more about the matching service are ACE co-principal investigator Albert Wu and team member Ezine Ezeajoku.
Thanks, Maylin. ACE is a team of faculty and staff at Johns Hopkins University who are experts in community-engaged research and program evaluation, and who have well-established connections with networks of researchers and evaluation experts. You can think of us as a kind of premium dating service where ACE acts as an agent to match promising E4A applicants to an appropriate researcher to help design an evaluation for their project. We do this by tapping our wide-ranging networks to find researchers outside of Johns Hopkins. The ACE service started in September 2018, and we've already had great experience and impressive success with establishing partnerships. So, Ezine, what happens when an applicant is referred to the matching service?
The case is assigned to one of our team members, a Partnership Acceleration Liaison, or PAL, who then creates a profile for the applicant. This profile includes a summary of the proposed evaluation, including the context and gaps in the evaluation proposal. The PAL then connects with the applicant to gain more insight on the proposal, the applicant's organization, capacity, and any other related elements. The most important goal for the POW is really to understand what the applicant wants from a potential research partner.
So can you give me some examples of what an applicant might consider to be important?
So far, the important preferences have been the location of the researcher, a shared passion for the work the applicant is doing, a potential role of the researcher as a lead or an advisor on the project, or the ability to work in partnership that extends far beyond the purposes of redesigning the evaluation plan. Now, these preferences are identified during the interaction between the POW and the applicant. And so the gaps are identified in the evaluation, and the applicant's preferences are put into consideration by the POW, who then searches for a research plan.
So, Agent 8, let's assume that you are the PAL on a case. After you have more insight about the applicant, then what do you do?
Great question. So, using our networks, we then identify and extensively review potential researchers that fit the criteria we have established together.
Can the applicant play a role in this selection?
Yes. Now, some applicants would like to see a list of identified candidates to discuss with their PAL, and in all cases, the applicant approves the matched research. Now, bearing this in mind, I would like to point out that the timeline to create a match will vary from one applicant to another, and this largely depends on the time commitment of both parties. Now, this timeline may also be affected by factors such as unexpected scheduling conflicts between applicants and researchers.
From our experience, there are some elements that make an applicant a good candidate. The organization should be committed to conducting an evaluation and to work with the researcher, if successfully funded, for the duration of the grants. The program or policy that will be evaluated has already been developed and is being carried out, or funding has been secured for its implementation. And there's at least one person in the organization who will be actively involved in establishing and then continuing the partnership.
So, does ACE help partners after a match is made?
Great question. ACE provides standardized documents to help guide the partnership, manage expectations, define roles for the partners, and agree on what success would look like for partners. ACE also provides limited seed funding to help establish partnerships and revise the research plan.
In addition, based on the needs of the partners, that funding might cover travel costs, cost of the meetings, and very limited collection of data to support the research proposal.
And of course, the PAL is available to both partners as a resource, for example, to facilitate the partnership or answer questions about other resources that can be useful to them. ACE sees it as one of its primary outcomes the creation of long-lasting partnerships. In our experience, all partners work toward the resubmission of the letter of intent to E4A as the main focus. However, some matched pairs have already decided to pursue alternative funding or to work on other projects together.
So Albert, what is the benefit of using ACE matching service?
Well, the applicant will get paired with a researcher who meets their specific needs and preferences, who adds to their effort, improves the proposed research design, and increases the chance of getting funded.
In addition, the applicant and its organization get experience, skills, access to a researcher's organization, and knowledge through the partnership. For example, there is a youth civic education program in the Midwest designed to improve individual and community health outcomes through a process of guiding young people to work with their local government so they can adopt health-promoting policies. Now, this program needed a researcher to clearly identify what health outcomes could be linked to the program and help with retention of the program participants. We were able to find them a researcher who had similar interests and help them form a partnership.
Great. Thank you, Azane and Albert. Now we'll talk about what you can expect if you are referred to either of our technical assistance services. First of all, there is no cost to participate in TA. And as Albert and Azane described, applicants who are referred to the matching service may receive a small amount of seed funding to offset nominal costs that are associated with forming those partnerships. Also, there's no timeline for submission of a new letter of intent to E4A and no rigid time commitment. We ask that while applicants getting design consultation are free to end their consultations at any time, and applicants in the matching service who have been matched with researchers and choose to work towards submitting an LOI to E4A set their own timelines themselves, and both partners can decide whether or not to complete the submission process. So let's briefly cover the various potential outcomes from technical assistance services. After receiving design consultation or matching service, you can modify, enhance, or completely overhaul your original proposal and submit it back to E4A in the form of a new LOI. Once this happens, the new LOI will be evaluated using the same selection criteria that we apply to all other applications, and it will go through an identical review process. If you do submit a new LOI after TA, there is a box to check on the application indicating that you received technical assistance. And this is only for our tracking purposes and will not affect the review of your proposal. Alternatively, you might decide that your project is not yet ready to apply to E4A for funding. You might want to focus instead on formative research or baseline data collection or do a pilot study prior to submitting an LOI. You may also decide that a different funding source is a better fit for the project and not apply to E4A at all. And we fully support all these decisions. And finally, it's important to underscore that being referred to technical assistance and going through the process of either design consultation or matching does not guarantee that your proposal will be funded. While we do expect that TA services will help you align your research project more closely with our standards, due to limits in our own funding resources, we have to weigh many other factors when making funding decisions. That said, we do hope that applicants who receive TA services are able to benefit from the experience in ways other than receiving funding. And applicants have told us that TA services have helped them improve their evaluation skills in other areas or generate ideas for future projects. So we recognize that participating in TA means dedicating your time and resources to the process without the guarantee of funding. And if you're invited to TA, you should consider whether these other benefits offer enough value regardless of the possibility of eventual funding. Now that you know what the services entail, let's talk about how to get referred to technical assistance, either design consultation or the matching service. The only way to be referred to TA is by first submitting a letter of intent, or LOI, through our application portal. You should follow the LOI template provided and address each section to the best of your ability, including describing the policy, program, or practice that you want to evaluate, the research question or questions, the populations affected, and the outcomes that you propose to measure. We do understand that applicants who need research partners may not be able to specify their research design at this stage. But the more details that you can provide in the LOI about the intervention that you intend to evaluate and the general research approach, the better we'll be able to judge if your project could benefit from TA. If you know that you need a research partner for this project, there is a box to check in the application system to request a referral to the matching service. However, not all applicants who request matching will be referred. the E4A Review Committee will take into consideration your entire proposal to determine if the overall project is a good fit for the service. And in the next slide, I'll go over what makes the project a good fit. There is no place in the application system to formally request design consultation. Our review committee will identify a project for design consultation if the project has promising components, but the rigor of the research design is not sufficient. So applicants who are offered technical assistance will receive an email inviting them to participate in TA. They'll also have a brief conversation with our staff to confirm the suitability of their project for either design consultation or the matching service. In summary, to receive TA, you must first submit an LOI that describes your proposed project and your research approach. If the project aligns well with what E4A is looking to fund, and if we think you could benefit from one of our TA services, your project will be referred to TA. And if you're referred to TA, you will have the opportunity to choose either matching or design consultation, depending on the needs of your team and your project. You might be wondering now if your project would be a candidate for TA. I'll now describe what types of projects we generally consider a good fit and provide a couple of examples. First, it's important to clarify that we only provide TA for projects that we would potentially fund under our call for proposals, but that do not have sufficient rigor or feasibility in their current state. This means they should be evaluating the effect of some sort of intervention, and the criteria of actionability, relevance, contribution to the evidence base, and inclusion of appropriate outcome measures all still apply. You can learn more about all of these criteria in the call for proposals. We especially welcome projects that are evaluating interventions that are unique or novel, scalable, and have promising implications for population health, and whose applicant teams are uniquely positioned in their communities to conduct or facilitate important research, either because they have special relationships or partnerships, or they have access to data or key information about a program or a policy, or are well suited in other ways to investigate an issue that wouldn't be possible to research otherwise. Let me now provide some hypothetical examples of the types of projects that could be referred to technical assistance. An example of a project that could benefit from design consultation is one in which a researcher is evaluating the impact of a new school anti-bullying policy on student physical or mental health. The researcher originally proposes to compare student health outcomes in several large schools before the policy was adopted with outcomes 2 years after the policy, or pre-post design. In general, the intervention, the anti-bullying policy, is actionable, relevant, and would make a valuable contribution to the evidence base about the health impacts of such policies. However, this study design is not sufficiently rigorous because there could be other factors that happen at the same time as the policy, so any changes in health outcomes couldn't be attributed just to the policy itself. At E4A, we generally don't consider pre-post designs to be adequate for establishing causality. If this applicant were referred to design consultation, we would work with him or her to come up with a more rigorous design, such as a difference in difference design that uses a suitable comparison group of schools. During design consultation, we might also discuss how to best collect the health outcome measures they propose, what a reasonable effect size would be, and whether their sample sizes would be adequate for the study. Throughout the process, the expectation is that the research question would remain the same, but the PIs would implement a different research design to answer the question in a more rigorous way. And here's a hypothetical example of a potential candidate for the matching service. Let's say there's a large social service organization that's implementing a comprehensive job training program for adults in the Appalachia region. Their program evaluation efforts have shown that their services improve employment for those who participate. The director of the organization now wants to conduct a more rigorous study to demonstrate whether the program also leads to better health and decreased substance misuse. But the organization has no researchers on their staff. Again, this research topic is considered actionable and relevant. Moreover, it involves a highly vulnerable population in an under-resourced part of the country. Through the matching service, this applicant could be matched with a research partner who specializes in the linkages between employment and health, or on research in rural areas. And together, they could come up with a way to collect the relevant data about their program and participant outcomes and design a study that would answer their mutually agreed upon research questions. We can now have time for questions and answers, and I'm going to let Erin, I'm going to switch over to Erin for this portion.
Great. Thanks, Maylin. And thanks, Albert and Azene, for all of the information that you've shared so far. I want to remind people who are participating that you can submit your questions through the chat feature. And in the interim, I will get started with some questions that were submitted during the registration process. So first, Maylin, I'll turn this one to you to start with. Someone is asking about, can an applicant receive both forms of technical assistance? And so I know the short answer is yes, but if you can talk a little bit about what those situations might look like.
Sure. So yes, applicants could receive both forms of technical assistance, but initially we do ask applicants to choose the form that's the best fit for their project at the time of the referral. After starting on either design consultation or matching, if it starts to become apparent that they need services, the other type of service, then that can be provided on a case-by-case basis. But the expectation is that the applicant will receive one form of TA to begin with, and then we'll go from there.
Great, thank you. And I know that earlier you mentioned that design consultation is not something that people can select up front, although people can indicate they're interested in the matching process. So maybe you can mention just a little bit about the process for, just now you said that people should select one. So maybe if you can talk just a little bit about how that aspect of the selection process does work when we contact people, when we refer them to technical assistance.
Sure. So again, just to review, if your project is referred to technical assistance, you'll get an email inviting you to participate in either service. And at that time, you will have a phone call with somebody from E4A staff to talk more about the needs of your project, and you will be able to then choose which project, which type of service is the best fit. But going back to the application process, you are correct that there is a box to check if you're to signal to us that you're interested particularly in matching. There's no such box to signal that you're interested in design consultation. Whether or not you check that box, you will have a chance at the after you've been referred to technical assistance to choose which service is the best fit for your project.
Great, thank you so much. And I see that we got a question from our audience in the webinar asking how many applications are selected per year. And so Maylin, if you want to talk about how many people are selected for technical assistance.
Yeah. As a relatively new service, it's sort of hard to say that we have an average number of applications selected per year. But we have referred several dozen projects to technical assistance thus far, and there's no quota at this point. If your project meets all the criteria and requires technical assistance, it will be referred.
Great, thanks. So Albert and Azene, there's a couple of questions about the seed funding aspect of the matching service that maybe the two of you can speak to. So one is a question about limits on the amount of seed funding, and the other is about whether use of seed funding has any implications for ultimate funding decisions from the program office. So if you want to start, and then Maylin or I can add in if there's anything additional from our end.
Sure. So the first question is, I gather, is there a limit on seed funding? If so, what is that limit? So we disperse seed funding based on the individual partner's needs. And there's no set limit, but the amounts that people ask for rarely exceed basically a few $1,000s. The applicant and the researcher partners first meet and decide what their needs are, and we expect that they would share seed funding in a mutually agreed upon way. Requests to cover data collection or analysis that are directly relevant to the development of the research plan are reviewed by ACE and E4A, and we make a decision if the request seems reasonable. So the second question was about, will asking for seed funding adversely affect my application? And the answer is no, not at all. Requests for seed funding really don't have any effect at all on how your application is judged or any funding decisions made by E4A or the foundation. The information about the fact that you did request seed funding is possibly shared with E4A or the foundation, but this is mostly so that we can really just figure out what kind of requests we will be getting and help us decide in general what our own internal criteria should be.
Great. Thanks, Albert. A similar vein that maybe, Malin, you can start with is just generally about how receiving TA could impact someone's chances of getting funding. So whether applications will be more competitive, or whether applicants who go through technical assistance have a greater likelihood of getting funded, or on the sort of flip side of that, whether applicants who are referred to TA are in some ways at any sort of disadvantage. Malin, do you want to start with that one?
Absolutely. So to answer the second part of that question, I will emphasize that receiving TA will not put your application at any sort of disadvantage. If anything, it should only improve your application to the extent that it aligns it better with what we're looking to fund. So there's not really a way of making to putting the application at a disadvantage. On the other hand, it's hard to predict how much technical assistance will increase your application's likelihood of funding, because every application and every project is very unique, and there are different reasons that they don't meet the criteria for funding. So depending on how difficult it is to make those corrections, a lot of applicants end up deciding not to apply again, and there are a variety of reasons for that. But on the other hand, we have had many applicants receive TA and greatly improve their project, and several of them have successfully moved on to the next round. So results do vary. It's hard to predict what the result will be for your application, but in any case, we do expect that technical assistance will only help to improve it, either to better align it with E4A funding or just to make it a stronger project and proposal for any other funders or applications that you might have for it.
Great, thank you. Albert, I'll come back to you, or Azane, perhaps for this question, which is about what happens if something goes sort of amiss after a match is made? What if there is turnover in one of the organizations? What if there are disagreements among the researcher and the initial applicant? So how do you all stay involved, and what are the steps that you take if if things don't go as anticipated or as hoped?
So Erin, to answer your first question, which I think is, so what happens if an applicant is not getting along with the researcher that they're matched with? Well, if this happens, we are able to work with the applicant to find another researcher. So the POW will help in facilitating the improvement of partnership. The other question I hear you asking is, what if there are changes in the organization? And for example, if the person who submitted the LOI is leaving. So as long as there's someone who is able to take the lead and continue with the project, then ACE support and also TA will still be available to support the project proposed in the LOI. We are also committed to the cause and to the program policy and just to ensuring that our applicant is successful. So if there's a desire by the applicant to continue the program or the policy or practice, then ACE will work with the applicant to find a research partner.
Great, thanks, Azane. So, Malin, there's a question about whether there's a way to request matching or technical assistance in advance of submitting a letter of intent. And I know you touched on the process a little bit earlier, but maybe if you can review some of that process for being selected or applicants inquiring about assistance.
Sure. So the only way to request technical assistance or to actually be referred to technical assistance is by submitting a letter of intent. There's really no way before an applicant does that for us to fully judge whether that project is suitable for technical assistance. So you're welcome to contact the program office here to use any of the resources that we'll mention later at the end of this webinar to get a better sense of whether your project would be a good fit potentially, but there's no official way to confirm that it would be until you submit a letter of intent and it's formally reviewed by our committee. So the first stage is always to submit that letter of intent. It's only 2 pages. It's relatively simple, and there is a template that you can follow online that asks for the required information. My recommendation is that you follow that template as closely as possible and make sure you try to answer all the questions that you can, even if you don't know some of the research aspects, and submit that, and we'll go from there.
Great, thank you. So we've gotten a handful of questions about the timelines, and there are a variety of different timelines that are being asked about. So let me tee them all up and then we'll move into them. So there's a question about once you are invited to participate in technical assistance, specifically about matching. How long does it take to get matched? And then the other question is about the timeline for resubmission following technical assistance. And so I think maybe Albert or Azane, if you want to start with sort of the timeline to get matched, and then once you're matched, what a potential timeline for resubmitting to Evidence for Action might look like. And then Malin, if you can speak a little bit about the design consultation. I know you touched on this a little bit earlier, but perhaps we can review.
Sure. So as far as how long does it take to get matched, we have only a dozen examples so far, but we can say that, from our current experience, it might take an average of 4 months, say between 3 and 6 months, from the moment that the applicant, gets referred to ACE until the first working meeting that you might have with your research partner. So that's approximately the time span. As far as resubmission, as we mentioned, initially you have to. It takes a while to find a partner, but then the timeline for resubmission is completely up to the applicant and partner, and so there are no deadlines or even expectations really that E4A has or ACE has. I think that we hope that the partnership will be able to improve things sufficiently so that an improved letter of intent can be put together, but there's no set timeline. Mei-Lin, do you want to say something about design consultation and the timeline there?
Sure. Very similar. There's no set timeline, but with design consultation, because there's not really the added time needed to find a research partner, it just really involves a series of conversations that the applicant has with the program office. It can often move much quicker, and depending on the extent to which the project needs to be revised, it could take just a matter of weeks, or it could take months or years. It really depends. Sometimes to make a project more rigorous, there are certain changes that are required at the program level, such as in the way that programs are rolled out or how they're administered, or it takes a while to find a suitable comparison group. So those things do take time. In other cases, if it's just a very simple change to the way that the data are collected or analyzed, it could move much faster. So again, there's no deadline once you receive design consultation, and likewise there's no standard timeline.
Great, thank you. So we just received a question about who is on the review committee and what is the criteria for decision making. And I just want to be clear that what I'm going to talk about right now is related to the decision making for being referred to technical assistance. And so once letters of intent are submitted, they're screened and then they're sent along to our review committee, which includes the leadership of the National Program Office. The reviewers can indicate that an application should be referred to technical assistance. And so letters of intent are all, regardless of, as long as they make it through the screening stage, are all reviewed on the same criteria: rigor, actionability, relevance, contribution to the evidence base, inclusion of health outcome measures, and feasibility. For technical assistance, the application would still need to be proposing an interesting, innovative, and important intervention to be evaluated, and it would need to be possible to evaluate that intervention in a rigorous manner. It also would need to be a question that is actionable. So we're still reviewing those applications, even those that get referred to TA, on whether they would be a good fit for funding eventually through evidence for action, as long as the feasibility and the rigor components were eventually met. And those are the two criteria that we're really trying to address through technical assistance: the rigor and the feasibility. So the other four review criteria, actionability, relevance, contribution to the evidence base, and health outcomes, all still need to be present to get referred to technical assistance. All right, so we're seeing just a few more questions. So let me turn one more again to Albert and Azane about the types of partners and sort of the level of input that applicants can have. I know you spoke about this a little bit previously, but people are asking a few questions about nuanced questions about what their partner, what characteristics their partner might have and how much say they might have in that. So again, can I be partnered with someone near my organization? Could I be partnered with a team of researchers? And what other characteristics might I be able to specify if I am if I'm referred to the matching service? So Albert or Azane, do you want to speak a little bit to the types of characteristics and how people who are referred to matching can be engaged in selecting their research partners?
Sure. So to answer the question, how much input can you have into the selection of a partner? So the applicant will have as much input as they want in this process. Our PALs actually work together with the applicant to identify all selection criteria for a researcher partner. The applicant could be involved in providing a preliminary list of the candidates for matching, and also may provide feedback on adjusting criteria with the PAL, and then the PAL confirms with the applicant which researchers to approach for interviews. And note that the final decision on partnering with the researcher is always made by the applicant. Now, in the rare event of the applicant, an applicant who is not happy with how the partnership is going, again, we will help to find another researcher if requested. On the question about partnering with more than one researcher, so for instance, can you partner with a team of researchers? This is possible if this provides value in achieving the necessary competency requirements for the applicant. We can pair you with more than one researcher, with a team of researchers who have already worked together and have the relevant experience that an applicant needs. Now, can you be matched with someone who's, for example, located near your organization? Again, this is a common preference in our experience, and we found that it's important, and so we prioritize and accommodate whenever possible to meet the applicant.
Great. Thanks, Azane. And are there any other types of criteria that you might share that people tend to specify or that people might specify when they're seeking a research partner?
I think that applicants want to be paired with someone who just is a good fit with them, that they're comfortable with. So someone who obviously who has the skills necessary to improve their design. So far, some important preferences that people have expressed are: is the person really interested in this topic? Are they really passionate about it? Could they potentially be the lead researcher in an LOI? So it may be that the applicant wants the researcher to lead on the LOI itself, or it may be, are they willing to serve as an advisor and to sort of to follow it? It really depends a lot on the specific capabilities and amount of time that the applicant has. I think that, again, the applicants have sometimes had past experiences with working with more academic or more researchy individuals. Sometimes those are good experiences. Other times they've not been so positive, and they are really intent on finding someone who who feels like a good match, who they feel can be a really good partner, who they feel would be a good team member. Certainly there may be some particular capability that the applicant feels like they are missing. Perhaps it might be something in research design or in analysis or in data collection, and they are looking for someone with that particular capability. These are just a few.
Yeah, thanks, Albert. And there's a couple questions on the flip side, so about the researchers who could be matched. So one is just about if researchers are interested in being sort of part of your network or wanted to volunteer to be a match, do you have a process or a way for accepting volunteers? And then the second question is do you have a list or a public database of researchers organized by region or organized by content expertise that people can just view, people who might be interested in finding research partners could just view more passively?
So we had, I think that when we began this whole project, we had some aspirations that we would be able to create a great freestanding directory of potential researcher, evaluator people who could be paired up with applicants. The reality has been thus far anyway that there is no such database, and while there are many databases, these databases tend to be maintained by individual organizations, sometimes even individuals, perhaps research groups, perhaps other foundations, and those organizations are not willing to simply make all of that public to anyone who asks for it. If it's like asking an organization, could I please have your mailing list? So what we have done so far is understood too that as we've been working on this, we've found that the needs and the particular projects that applicants are putting together tend to be quite specific. They deal with very specialized topics. The applicants have specific needs. And then they are also in different regions of the country. And there certainly is no single list that exists that could be used to query. So we've used a combination of approaches which include asking our colleagues, many of them at Johns Hopkins, but many of them outside of Johns Hopkins, for access to their specific networks for a specific applicant. We've also simply done searches, wider searches, in case none of our colleagues or people in our network come up with something immediately. We found that most of the time, though, that someone knows someone in their network and is able to help facilitate the connection. So that's the approach that we have taken so far.
Great. And then just the last question about, as people are learning about your service on the researcher side who might be interested in finding practitioner partners to work with, is there a way that people can be in touch with you to volunteer to be part of your potential researcher network?
So we would love to have people, sort of send us information about their willingness to work with mostly sort of community-informed or community-engaged research projects. And we are sort of beginning to compile, so far, a relatively small list of those people, but it's always good to know. There certainly might be an opportunity in the future to match one of those individuals up with an applicant. Those obviously, there are no guarantees.
Sure. And the best way for people to reach out to you about that?
I think that perhaps sending I might defer to Mei Lin to ask about that, but certainly I think the default would be to send a query to E4A, and they could pass it on to us. We may
I think that's right.
want to establish a, sort of an easier to use contact button of some sort, so that that could be done from E4A.
Sure. That sounds great. Well, thank you so much. We are drawing to a close of our time. If people have additional questions that you didn't get answered today, please feel free to be in touch with us. I also would encourage you to review the frequently asked questions on our website. There is both an FAQ section about the general program and call for proposals, as well as specific questions related to technical assistance on our technical assistance webpage of the Evidence for Action website. We also hold recurring live question and answer sessions on the third Thursday Thursday of every month. And you can ask E4A staff questions about the application process, including questions about technical assistance. Details about this virtual office hours are available on the News and Events page of our website. And as you can see here, there are a variety of ways to get in touch with us, and we encourage you to reach out. I want to thank you again, Albert and Azadeh and Mei Lin, and I want to thank the participants on the webinar. And have a great rest of your day. Thanks for joining us.